Alrighty, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. On my screen right now, I have our flyer, and I'm gonna alt text it out for y'all who cannot see the screen. It says Web Accessibility Study Group, single page application, Thursday, November 7th at 4 p.m. EST. We're here. And it's a picture of me and Dorlin smiling with Tank in the background. Tank is a black lab guide dog. All right, let's talk about announcements. Also, this is Tank again. This was Tank's Halloween costume, and it's really cute. He was a painter. Tell us about this, Dorlin.
He was not in it for very long, don't worry, because I'm pretty sure his face is not looking too pleased. But it's just a little costume I got on Chewy for it's a French painter, and so there was a little strap that went around the back of his neck that velcroed, and then little elastic pieces where you could slide what looks like pants over the front paws or the front legs. So he's laying down and he's got these looking like he's got blue pants on his legs. And then is it a striped shirt? I
Yes,
think.
it's a striped shirt, and he looks like he's wearing jeans, which is so funny.
Yeah, and then there's two little arms attached to the costume, and one has a paintbrush in it, and the other has a painter's palette. And then he's got a little red bow tie on, and there's actually a beret on top of his head, but it's black, so I think it blends in with his head.
I didn't even notice that. Yeah, that is a beret up
Yeah.
here. That's hilarious. All right, so a few announcements before we get into it. This week has been a week. We all know that it's been a week. But I just wanted to say that we are super, super fired up about accessibility, and we want to keep the energy going. I know energy may feel a little low, but I don't know. This really whipped me up into a small frenzy. So I'm going to take that as a win. I know some of us may feel the opposite, and that is also totally valid. Any remarks on that?
I'm also excited to be here. Been a crazy week, but it's nice to be doing something that's tangible, making the world a better place, and hanging out with all our accessibility study buddies.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm thinking about everyone this week for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to everyone's favorite topic that we never talk about and we only hint at. Braille drama. It's finally happening. We're going to do an entire stream on learning Braille. We're going to do like an intro to Braille class with Dorlin, and Dorlin's going to teach us a little bit of Braille. She's going to get into the history of Braille, a little bit of Braille drama, and that's going to be the second week of December on Thursday, when we usually have our Web Accessibility Study Group streams at 4 p.m. Instead of a web accessibility topic, we're going to be learning Braille. And we're going to have a hands-on activity as well. So we'll let everyone know in the Slack group about that, and whatever materials you may want to bring for that. All right. Our last update is it's official. We are leaving Slack. We did a vote in the Slack group whether or not we wanted to stay on Slack, if anyone felt neutral, or if anyone wanted to leave Slack. And pretty much a lot of people said they were down to leave Slack and go to Discord. The reason we wanted to move away from Slack, as you may or may not know, is because a lot of the features on Slack are hidden behind a paywall. And most of our posts can only be there for about 60 days and then they get deleted. So all of the amazing resources that everyone has been adding to the group are all gone. There are no resources essentially if they have been in there for longer than 60 days. And I think that that is just a tragedy. So we also noticed when it came to Slack, because Slack is a very professional, like most people use it at their job, it's kind of corporate feeling. There's just not a lot of engagement when it comes to Slack. And I think a lot of people are using Discord more socially. And this is not really a corporate professional group. It's kind of like our fun study group. And we want to keep that energy in that kind of respect. So we're gonna slowly pilfer our way back to Discord, and just keep alert. We'll put some messages in the Slack to let y'all know what that looks like. I have to set our Discord back up. There are a few channels that got deleted, so I just have to redo the whole thing and then create a few bots. We might do a stream of me making bots and people helping us if you want to, but we're going to figure it out within the next like month or two and keep everyone posted and aboard. If you want to help with the Discord, let me know. I remember when we had the Discord, we had a bunch of roles. They were all color coded. It was so fun. So I'll probably be reaching out to a few of you to see if you want to help us kind of manage the Discord and stuff like that. What's up, Kathy Codes? All right.
Hey,
Those are all of our
Kathy.
announcements. We're going to get right to it. So today we're talking about single page applications. First, we need to figure out what that even means, right? So when we're talking about single page applications, which we from here will call spas, they're pretty much a web application that loads a single page, and this page is created with HTML and some type of framework that use JavaScript like React or any of the other ones. And it dynamically updates content as the user interacts with the page without reloading the page to take you to a separate page. So everything stays on this one page and doesn't move away from it. If anything looks like it's going to another page, the only thing that's really happening is a different template is being kind of uploaded on there. So once loaded, only parts of the page is being refreshed, and it's supposed to provide a seamless user experience that's similar to a desktop application. Some examples of this, and Todd's laughing, so I guess we'll figure out why. But some examples of that include Gmail, Google Maps, Facebook, and Twitter. I like to, one way of thinking about it for me is just thinking about things that seem like they infinitely scroll and nothing really changes. And that happens with like a lot of social media type apps and Spotify and things like that. YouTube. So anything to add for any of you guys about single page applications and the definition or examples?
Uh, hmm. Mm-hmm. Not right now.
All right. Let's talk
I
about
think we all need a spa day. How about that?
real. Let's talk about how spas work. So this is the part where our good friend Todd will probably be taking over a little bit, but I'll take a stab at it because this is our study group time. So I like to think that reiterating it out loud helps me kind of put it in my brain a little bit. But it uses client side rendering, whatever that means. It uses JavaScript frameworks like React or Angular or Vue, which is pretty much just a library that uses JavaScript to visually render some type of UI. And that's what it's using to render content on the screen. It also uses Ajax and API calls. So we're going to get into Ajax a little bit, and we talked about it in our last stream as well. But they're pretty much retrieving data asynchronously, which reduces the server load and improves speed. So it's supposed to make the app a little faster, but there are some advantages and disadvantages to that. One advantage is it's fast, it's responsive, there's fewer page reloads, and it's efficient for modern interactive apps like all the ones that we use today. But some of those disadvantages are initial load times can be longer. So, you know, that little spinning wheel of death that we sometimes see, sometimes that happens. And we'll talk about what that means for especially people who are using assistive technology. And something we don't really care about that much, but it is interesting to note is you may have some SEO challenges, which is how people find your website, because the crawlers that use the search engines have a hard time finding it based off of what is being used. Okay, so anything that we should add or that I didn't make clear?
So
We can
Client-side
ahead,
rendering
Todd.
basically is what's rendered to the browser using JavaScript to the user.
Ooh, I have this thing that I found on Google when I Googled it. I think this is kind of talking about how like Ajax happens. So let's talk about Ajax first, and then we'll come back to this and walk everyone through this nice flow chart in great detail. I think it would be helpful. I don't know. We'll see.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk about Ajax, because to understand spas, we kind of have to understand what Ajax is. And this is something that is not that new to me, but I've never really thought about how it worked. It's just a word that I knew. Ajax is asynchronous JavaScript and XML. First question, what is XML?
See if anybody in the chat.
Does anyone in the chat know what XML is? I will be very impressed. Chat's kind of quiet today. I don't know.
It is. XML is the devil. Stay away. Fair.
Okay, Matt Campos, I'm intrigued.
Fair. Fair.
Anyone else have something more descriptive that doesn't scare me?
Here, I'll take a shot. Basically, XML is extensible markup language. It was, it's been around for quite a long time. I remember the days before XML, so I'll date myself there. And basically, it's similar to HTML, but without predefined tags. So you define your own tags specifically for your needs. I guess one example could be a template tag, for instance, that you may use in an app that you're building with whatever technology you're using. XML is a powerful way to store data, and it can be searched, it can be shared, but XHTML, MathML, SVG, RSS, those languages were based on XML. And you can still see some of the remnants of that, especially if you go search in for like older sites that use XHTML still, that are like space junk and floating around in the internet ether, SVGs still have some. When you create an SVG, it still has some XML attributes in there in the code, so you can view it there. And I'm trying to remember. It was a very picky language, right? It was it had to be well formed. It had to conform to syntax rules of XML and semantic rules, and a lot of developers found it to be tedious and a lot of work. So that's pretty much XML in a nutshell.
Okay.
What about in terms of accessibility and how like screen readers were able to interpret that? Was it about as accessible as HTML?
Yeah, pretty much.
All right.
You could have an XML style sheet, and I'm trying to think back here. Basically, it's like any other language. For me, this is my opinion. It's the developer, it's the coder, it's the person that's doing the work that sets the tone of how accessible it is. So XML, XHTML, or HTML.
Right.
it's as accessible as the person that's doing the coding and what they know.
Matt Campo said XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. It is basically a way of marking up data like we do with HTML, where the raw data has some tags and attributes adding metadata to it. It's annoying to debug and very picky with how you write it. Any error just breaks the whole thing and makes it not work. Usually without an error reporting, or when the reporting is there, it is very cryptic. Okay. So Ajax, in a nutshell, is a technique for creating fast, interactive web applications by exchanging data with a web server in the background without refreshing the whole page. That is it in a nutshell. It's kind of allowing parts of the web page to update independently and provide a smoother experience. Some examples of that would be like an auto-updating news feed, instant form validation, and live search suggestions. So something like Google, where you're like typing something in, and as you're typing it, other things are loading at the bottom. And if we think about that, we can think about how that would in fact affect people who are using assistive technology, because they need to know that something's happening. So that's kind of what we're getting into here. Let's talk about how it works. So here's the process flow. The user action triggers an event. So like we're clicking a button that does something. So say the button we click creates a visual explosion on the page just for fun. You click it and then fireworks go off visually. Ajax sends a request, or Ajax request. JavaScript sends it to an HTTP request to the server, sends an HTTP request to the server. The server responds, it processes the request, sends back the data, often in JSON or XML format, and then the page updates. And JavaScript updates only the relevant part of the page with the new data. So some advantages of that is it's faster for the user. It reduces server load. It's more interactive. But like I said before, the disadvantages are that SEO challenge. It requires JavaScript and it has complex error handling. So here's a little flow chart that I thought would be helpful for those of us who are looking at the screen. Maybe it'll be helpful. I don't know. We'll ask Todd when we're done with this, but looking at this, my understanding of it is we have the browser, and within the browser, some type of event occurs. Say we're clicking that button, it creates that XML HTTP request object and sends it to the server. The server processes that request. It creates a response and sends the data back to the browser. And then the browser pretty much displays it. Exactly what we just said, but it gives you a nice little flow chart that I thought was helpful. So let's bring it all together now. So now that we kind of have an understanding of what a SPA is and how Ajax works, how does that impact accessibility? We're going to take this back to the IAAP body of knowledge, and this is kind of what they say. We always like to take it back to them because they're the ones who are telling us what they want us to know. But single page designs, so basically designs that bring in new content through Ajax processes without reloading the page, present a unique set of accessibility challenges. Users need to know that the content has changed. There needs to be some type of mechanism to show or tell the user that something is on the screen, especially if they can't see that content. It's very common for Ajax-driven websites to make selections and then not alert the user. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to the body of knowledge. Did I delete it? Let's see. There we go. And this is their little topic area right here. Let me move this over. And I'm going to read this out and then we're going to kind of break it down. Screen readers typically react to a normal page load event by reading the page title and in the case of some screen readers, reading a summary of available semantic elements. Like page has 7 headings, 3 landmarks, and 27 links. Single page applications do not fire normal page load events. Single page applications like Ajax use Ajax to pull in content to the current page URL rather than load a new page or URL, usually with the intent to improve performance and streamline the user experience of the web application. Screen readers typically do not announce anything when content is loaded via Ajax, so users may be completely unaware that new content has been loaded. So if the Ajax content is loaded as a direct result of user action, they need to be notified. So this is basically what we're going to spend today talking about, how we do that.
Is that a question? Because I can answer that.
Yeah, we're about to talk about it right now. How do we notify users of changes? So there are a few ways, and then we're going to really talk about it as a discussion. First, we want to send focus to the new content that's loaded. Also, we want to use ARIA live announcements. So this is really cool because in a lot of our previous sessions where we were talking about these topics, we had a lot of questions that we didn't answer because we didn't have time. And a lot of them had to do with live regions, timers, how often to alert the user and things like that. So I'm really excited. Anyways, you need to notify users of how to load and reload the page. And we need to also provide status messages.
Yep.
So one question, what'd you say?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say it all starts with accessible JavaScript.
Oh, tell us more.
I had when I was still on Twitter, I tweeted out that, you can write accessible JavaScript, and boy, did the villagers come after me.
Why?
Well, how do you do that? There's no way you can do that. Yes, there is. So I have a feeling you're about to take us there, Africa. So go ahead.
Well, my first question, I've been learning a lot about focus and how to handle focus. I think we talked about it a lot last time too, but can you give us an example of sending focus to new content that's loaded? So like if we click a button and the button pops something else up, we're pretty much just sending the focus to this area, right? The alternative is to not send the focus anywhere so that nothing happens.
Correct.
Right.
Modal dialogues, toast notifications.
You said toast notifications?
Mm-hmm.
What's that again?
So toast notification, like you get your what's a good one? Live chat example is a good example. When you go to a page to, let's say you go to a page that you want to buy headphones, and that little robo chat comes up. Are there any questions I can answer for you today? That's very similar to, if not a toast notification.
Okay.
And
So-
it has to disappear after a certain amount of time, or it should.
Oh, I know what you're talking about now. So like the little pop-ups and they're kind of there and then they kind of disappear. With the main caveat of that being, if you are going to use a toast notification, you have to make sure that it stays on the screen long enough for someone to even get to it or even see that it's there.
Correct. And focus should go to that so that it can be read out to the user and then go back to the last place that had focus that the user was at. Right.
So some good considerations when you're building is a lot of it has to do with just sending focus to the right place so that whatever assistive technology the person is using can pick up in the right spot and not just ignore whatever's happening. And I think that's where
Right.
a lot of the breakdown on the web is happening specifically.
Absolutely.
Matt Campos had a question. Do screen readers reread the page when there is a navigation triggered by the history API? Like it is not a user clicking on a link, but an entry generated by JavaScript that changes the URL and the back forward browser buttons. What?
So, depending upon, and me not being a daily screen reader user, I only know of that it can be triggered by the history API. That's why you have to be careful and write accessible JavaScript. As for the back forward browser buttons, that's a very that's one of the most common issues I found when I was doing auditing, especially with mobile apps, that the browser back forward button or previous next buttons, they don't work as intended because the accessibility is not there or it doesn't exist at all.
Okay.
Now, with these single page applications, you're having to write in something so that there's a history being created so that someone could use that back button, correct? Do I
Yeah.
understand that?
Yeah.
And so if someone doesn't take the time to do that, then I assume the back button or the back and forward buttons aren't going to work.
Yeah. And if they do, it's not performant. Obviously, it's not accessible, and it can cause a lot of havoc.
Wow, I've never thought about this. I'm not going to lie. That's really interesting. All right, let's talk about this one. Using ARIA Live announcements. When would we use a ARIA Live announcement? Let's talk about what they even are. Let's back up there first. What is an ARIA Live announcement and why would we use it? Can you give us an example, Todd?
Let's see. A good example would be Lord.
I have one.
I was about to
Okay.
say, I know Darlene has like five.
Let me
I'm drawing
think,
a
Todd,
blank
here. So how about this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm on a single page application and I'm trying to purchase things, and add something to my cart. I click the add to cart button and then I get an ARIA Live message saying item added to cart.
Yes.
There we go.
Perfect.
And my focus then stays on that add to cart button. It doesn't move to some message there. I'm just getting this message
Correct.
so that I know that an action has been performed.
Correct. Yep. That's
Darlene, can you
perfect.
give us some more examples? Can you
Oh.
spell it out for us, actually?
Gosh, anytime you want your focus to stay where it was, but some content or some action is happening and we don't want silence. So you need to alert the user that that's happening. And so we're going to put that in our ARIA Live region. Gosh, I gave you my best example there, but I think, if you were to hit maybe like a post button on something where you're interacting with a chat, your focus might stay on that post button. I suppose maybe they could take you back to it being in, to an empty edit field so it would have happened. But just hitting that post button, if I hear posted, I know that that has happened. A lot of times for me, or a lot of my examples I'm thinking of are happening when I'm hitting like buttons and something is happening, but I want to stay on that button for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Emma Dawson Dev, hey, what's up? They said error messages. That's a really good one too. So
That's
if you're
a perfect one. Yeah. So with ARIA Live, you want to be made aware immediately that there is something that you need to turn your attention to, like an error message. So, that's when you use ARIA Live. Something like assertive that will, you know, or, you can either, most of the time I've seen assertive because it announces immediately. Um,
I would think
you,
if you're clicking a button, it wouldn't actually matter which you used, right? Maybe
no,
not, but
it
because
doesn't matter.
um, although another one that you made me think of in this where it does matter is if you've got like a countdown timer. You have a
Mhm.
certain time limit to accomplish your task on this website, and it's going to let you know that that time's going down. And however often that is going to alert you to that, if you put it as an assertive region, it's going to immediately tell you that. It doesn't matter if you're inputting data, if your screen reader is reading something out, it is assertive and it is going to let you know right then. And then the polite messages, it's going to wait till I finish typing out having the screen reader read the field to me or whatever's happening. And at the end of that string, then it's going to politely give me the message,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
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 And one thing to keep in mind is if you're going to use an ARIA Live announcement, make sure that this announcement is brief. You don't want it too verbose because it's kind of just like, hey, tap on the shoulder quickly. Let me tell you something rather than like, I'm going to give you 2 sentences worth of something random. And you want to remove the announcement pretty much as soon as it's being given. So the focus should always stay wherever the user is. You're just kind of interjecting really quickly to let them know that something's happened.
Hmm. Yep. So tickers like stock tickers, sports tickers, news crawlers, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about loading or reloading pages. So we always kind of want to alert people. Well, one thing, we never want to load or reload a page automatically. I know that's like rule numero uno. Never reload a page without something happening that the user is triggering explicitly. Any other accessibility considerations when it comes to like loading or reloading a page?
What this
Uh,
is making me think of my example here, and Todd, I'd love you to correct me if this isn't what's happening there, but there's been pages I'll be on where you're reading maybe a news article and they've got like an auto updating thing on like a Twitter post that's connected to it or something,
mhm.
or comments or something, and then those will be auto updated or whatever, which incorrectly, I believe, here is reloading the whole page, sending my focus back up to the top. So it doesn't matter where I was in that news article, I'm back at the top and I'm going to have to go find that place again. And by the time I get down there, it might reload the page on me again to add that content. So it's super obnoxious.
Mhm. Yep.
The good
Yeah,
thing
you should
about,
let. Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say you should let the screen reader user know that the page is going to reload or load. Bottom line.
Right. Yeah. All I was going to say is the good thing about loading and reloading a page is there's not really a lot of accessibility considerations as long as the loading of the page is not just random or happening by itself.
Hmm.
The user, once it reloads, they kind of know what's going to happen. The screen reader is going to read everything. It's going to be pretty obvious. All right, let's talk about status messages. So, status messages. What's a good example of like a status message? I guess if you've submitted something and then it tells you that you've done it.
Yeah,
Like,
you've completed filling out the form and you have successfully filled out the form. Boom, there's your status message.
So I'm reading.
Or I just thought of another one. You submit the shopping cart and, thank you for your purchase kind of thing.
You got anything, Dorlin?
No, I can't think of any. Those are my favorite. The thank you for submitting this form ones, knowing that it went in. Would there be other status messages like if the well, I guess those are error messages, not status messages. If you try to submit a form, but there's errors within it. Or maybe what about if you're moving through some page that has like 6 steps on it? That's a single page application and it's going to tell you step 2 of 6 completed. Something like that.
Yeah, I think the main rule for status messages is that the user should be alerted of it without the focus going to wherever it is. Like it shouldn't rely on receiving focus to be activated. It should be automatically told to the user and they can continue about their way.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's talk about one of my favorite topics. I don't know why it's my favorite topic, probably because it's something I just never thought about and we talked about it for a long time. But it's time limits. Time limits. I love time limits because it's like my favorite thing to catch people on when I'm auditing things because it's never done correctly almost. But time limits are things like auto reloads, like if you've been idle for some time, and something's going to reload because of that, session timeouts, which is pretty much the same thing, and then timers. So we're going to get into it this time. We're going to really think about it and talk about it. Auto reload. Oh, I didn't even do any. These don't really have their own slides, but I have some general information that I've written, and then we'll kind of get into it for time limits. So users should be alerted of how much time they have left when completing a timed task. It should allow the user enough time to react to save whatever data they've created. So my rule of thumb, and I'm pretty sure I got this from the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, is anything that is telling you something is going to happen needs to give you at least 20 seconds to do whatever that thing is. So like that's a really good rule to stick in your brains. If the user doesn't have at least 20 minutes to interact with whatever has popped up on their screen to keep it going or to save whatever, then it's not accessible. Mm-hmm. Data should be saved if using a session timeout, or the user needs to be explicitly warned that they're going to lose data. Like nothing should just be like timing out and then all their data is gone, because that's extremely frustrating. You got to at least let people know and give them enough time to not let that happen. Or if they're going to, if there's a session timeout, it needs to be saved so that they can get back to it when they do come back to their computer, if they've walked away or something like that. Timers should have a dynamic countdown feature. So like an ARIA Live announcement. And we're gonna talk about that again because I think it's an interesting thought experiment, especially because there's no hard and fast rule about it. And we have a screen reader user who can tell us what they would prefer. And everyone's kind of different, as we learned. And then, like we said before, we're never refreshing or reloading anything automatically ever, period. Hey, Robodom. Robo said, I've encountered a lot of sites that don't give warnings for timeouts and have lost all the information I entered. Very annoying and frustrating. Yeah, that sounds super annoying. Oh, Karina Merg. What's up, Karina? Karina said, making sure I'm understanding the first point correctly. With a spa that has the same header/navigation at the start of each page, clicking a link that takes the user to a different page The focus should not be at the top of the page, i.e., header, but at the start of the new content. Usually that would be the main element. Let me see. So if it's a spa, it wouldn't be taking them to a different page, would be the first thing, unless I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
of that incorrectly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
If it's taking, so if it's a website, it should take you uh, from that link to a new page, and you should be on the first focusable element.
right.
But accessibility being as subjective as it is, that's one of those. It depends. It depends. Answers a ton of accessibility questions because it depends on who is the person that you're asking. To be honest, so some people will tell you it should be. They may tell you it should be on the main content, but for me, it's you should have it focused back at the top of the new page and not the content when you're taking from a link to an external page.
I would agree with that as well.
Mm.
You should have a skip link that's within the
Yes.
first like three errors, I think it is. Like the first
Three.
three elements should take you to a skip link that'll get you to the main region so that the user has the choice to do that, but also has a choice to go through all the elements again if they need to. I think with a spa, which is something that's just dynamically updating on one page, I can't think of an example for that of what you're talking about. So I won't speak on
That
that, but
that could be a link that opens up a new window in on the mobile device. I've seen that happen before. So you click a link and boom, you're looking at a new window with whatever. If in that case that happens, it should be again first within the first three focusable elements of the page
okay.
or the tab.
So we're going to talk a little bit about timers. Hold on, let me see. Robo had a question. Is a skip link a link that jumps to the main content or the important section of a spa? So this is a good question because I actually don't know this, but my understanding is skip links are mostly for regular websites. I don't know that spas have skip links. I've never encountered them, but I don't know.
I would think they do, and it's going to be the same thing where it needs to skip all repeated content, any contents that is on every page there at the top. If you've got like your home, your chat, your whatever links on this single page application, it should skip all those and go to the main content of that page, right?
Right.
And then those links, they're not going to an external page. They're just, making all that Ajax magic happen or whatever, and should take you to the part on the screen that the new content has appeared on. One thing I thought of when they were talking about this, and this is beyond the skip link, because the skip link, it's skipping you past the repeated blocks of content. But then like an example, since Gmail on the web, that's an example of single page applications. And there's a lot of links on that one that are just going to move you to a different part of the page. Like go to your inbox. Can't remember what the link actually reads as, but that's just going to move me to a different part of that screen. So that's the other example I had.
Okay.
Yeah, and Dom says, I've seen them mostly on recipe sites that jump to the recipe. Those wouldn't be considered that skip link, even though it acts like one. That's basically just a jump link
Yeah.
from the top of the content to a section of content that is way below where you'd have to either scroll or maneuver to.
Right. Okay, so let's see. I want to make sure that we talk about all of this. I think these are obvious. Let's talk about timers. Timers and ARIA Live announcements. So, would a timer be considered assertive or polite? Like how do they work? I've created a timer. Oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed to even say this. So one of my first websites had a timer on it. It was my stretch break app that I created, and it had a 5-minute timer that you could use, and then you could go through all the gifs of my yoga videos and do different stretches. And of course, I did not use ARIA on it at all. Period. So I'm just thinking about it now. But if I was to use ARIA on it, what would be the perfect way to be alerted? I know when we talked about timers, we talked about how in the last like 10 to 20 seconds, you want more alerts so that you know that you're at the end of the time. But if you have a lot of time left, you might want alerts like every 30 seconds or something like that. But I was just curious what if you've done something like this, and everyone in the chat too, you can kind of just let us know if you've ever made a timer, you ever thought about these ARIA Live regions, or if you are an assistive technology user, how often you would want to be alerted, because that's something that I kind of think about a lot now.
So I've seen basically you have 3 values. You have assertive, you have polite, and you have off. Off is the default. Okay. I've seen polite, which it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You want that to be read immediately. So assertive is how I've done it in the past, because you're being read, and don't get me wrong, not every second that's clicking or ticking off the timer, like every 10 seconds or every 30 seconds. So if you have 5 minutes, right, you probably want to do an announcement every minute saying how much time's left. That would be polite. That you would set that at polite. Trying to think back to, I mean, when I used assertive for it, it was very, very intrusive. So that's when I switched to more spaced out announcements and polite. So it didn't make sense to me in the beginning using polite, but it's when it should be presented at the next opportunity that's ideal, like every other or every minute that's off the timer, that's when you want to do that.
So assertive if you're giving it by the minute. Did I get that right?
Even if it's a minute, and Dorlin, feel free to stop me, but I don't think screen reader users want to hear every second ticking off a timer.
I don't think we could get anything done if there was.
Yeah.
Literally, all of my speech would be that timer reading. And sometimes that is a problem with websites. Like I'll have something will be counting down, and I can't focus on anything else, or like not literally move the focus, but my brain can't focus on the task at hand because of how much info I'm getting. I think this is one of those like accessibility is an art things when it comes to ARIA Live regions. Like you really need to think about what the timer is for, what task your user is trying to accomplish, and how necessary and how often these messages are going to be useful even. So like, I think the fewer messages earlier on so I can accomplish my tasks tends to be good. A few more towards the end because I don't want to run out of time accidentally. I don't want to not get that notification. And so I think the timing of those messages is something to really think about, but certainly not every second. And I think maybe every 10 towards the end there. But if it's going to interrupt your user from accomplishing the task by telling them about these seconds, then you're kind of defeating the point. So I do think you need to think about how often they're going to be timed. And then in terms of the assertive versus polite, you can use either of them wherever you want to. Essentially, what is happening when you use an assertive region is it is going to immediately stop a screen reader from reading whatever string of text they were reading at that moment and insert this message to them. So this is to be used if you need your user to know that right now, or if it's something that's happening after they're doing like pressing a button and performing an action where they're going to expect a message. I think assertive is good, but certainly assertive if you need them to know that message then. But keeping in mind you're interrupting whatever speech is going on. Then for the polite messages for ARIA Live, it is going to wait till the screen reader finishes reading whatever string it was reading before it inserts that message. So if you were reading maybe like the little message at the end, the acceptance agreement, where you're going to have to check a box and you're halfway through that. If it was assertive, it would cut you off right then. You'd have to start reading that message that you were reading before the ARIA Live message popped up. You'd have to start reading that again. Maybe, or you might be able to start partway through, but it stopped your speech. You're going to have to make it start again. But if you've marked it as an ARIA polite region there, it's going to wait till it finishes reading that it's already reading once that live message pops up with how much time is left, and then let you know that. And so like it can be kind of disruptive when it's assertive, as Todd said. And so if you need to interrupt and use assertive. But if it's something where you're in the first couple of minutes of something, using that polite and letting the screen reader finish what it's saying first, I think can be very appreciated. But as we talked about before, all users have their different preferences. So do remember that these are kind of my personal preferences as well as a screen reader user.
Yeah, this is no hard and fast rule with these. These are just good considerations. This is, the ambiguous part of web accessibility, but good to know. All right, our last thing we're going to talk about before we get to our bonus topic is Ajax events. So just some considerations. Notifying screen readers of updated info that has been loaded is something we talked about. Managing the focus for the user is also something we talked about. Let's talk about some things that Ajax does, like lazy loading and infinite scrolling. So lazy loading is when, as you're scrolling through or doing something is kind of loading live. So you may see that little spinny ticker that's showing you that something is being managed on the screen, making sure that the screen reader knows that something's loading if it's loading slowly, but not alerting them if it's something that's going to quickly load. So if you know something's only going to take a couple seconds to load, while I may see something loading visually as a visual user, you don't really need to let a screen reader know like, hey, loading, if it's going to load quickly. But you do want them to know that it's loading if it's going to take more than like 5 seconds, because that's longer than someone would expect something to load in today's day and age. So something to think about. Infinite scrolling, the bane of my existence, aka essentially we talked Beyonce's website has infinite scrolling, which is wild. But I wonder if they still do. But anyways, infinite scrolling. My rule of thumb for infinite scrolling is let the user load new content. Give them the option of, if they get to the end, there's a button that says load more. Right? Or even better, but this doesn't really work for example, something that is a spa, typically we would see, instead of infinite scrolling, the numbers at the bottom showing how many pages you can go through. But for this purpose, let's just use a button where they can load it. And that button needs to be keyboard accessible. And all the infinite things that are coming up below it needs to be keyboard accessible. Those are those fast and hard rules. Anything else that you've encountered, Dorlin or Todd, when it comes to?
I mean, that's the thing with infinite scrolling, right? Like if it's continuing to scroll, like if I'm flicking through element by element on my iPhone, or if I'm tabbing through something on the keyboard on the computer, I'm going to stay in that infinite scrolling, and I'm not going to be able to access that content down below it without performing some other tricks, which I might be able to do as a screen reader user, but someone who's just a keyboard user might not be able to do. And like as a screen reader user, when I was new to things, I didn't know there was a trick to get past any of it. It's just all of a sudden you're stuck in there. So that's my 2 cents.
So,
Give it to us.
infinite scrolling should be burnt down to the ground and shot into space, never to be seen again. It's the bane of my existence. It was the bane of my existence when doing auditing, because, okay, you have a spa, you have infinite scrolling. I need to audit the footer of your site. I don't want to keep scrolling 15 minutes in and still not be at the footer of your website on a mobile app when I'm doing a mobile audit. So, kind of a segue into the future here, it is a deceptive pattern. It is one of those patterns that gets you hooked. And just like we're seeing with any social media out there, Threads, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, any of those that use infinite scrolling, you get attached. How many people in the chat, or even, Dorlin or Africa, how many times have you said, I'm looking at a few reels on Instagram, and then 2.5 hours later, you're like, where did the time go? That is a deceptive pattern. It is with intent, and it keeps you hooked into that scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, which is what they want. They want your engagement. So, yeah, infinite scrolling for me. I've even talked to the guy that invented infinite scrolling, and I said, do you know what you did? And he actually said to me, yeah, and I regret doing it.
Damn,
Wow.
that's wild.
Because, we have all this going around, around us. And regardless of all that, I don't know how many times I have been making dinner and letting dinner cook and been caught in the infinite scrolling trap and burnt something. So it's, yeah, I'm not a fan of it at all. And matter of fact, pagination. I much prefer pagination.
Right.
Give me pagination all day, just as long as it's accessible. And making pagination accessible is relatively easy.
Someone in the group, actually, in the Slack group that we have, asked about pagination and how it should be read by a screen reader like a couple of days ago. But I also want to say that a footer after infinite scroll is diabolical. Like, what? That doesn't even make sense to me. I can't wrap my brain around a footer at the end of an infinite scroll, but okay then. Also, Mad Compost, shout out to DeviantArt. Man, when I was a teenager, that was my website. They apparently had awesome implementation of infinite scrolling. They included a header and a footer marking each section with the page number, buttons to navigate it, and all the goodies. But then they made their website worse, which is not a surprise, I'm sure, to anyone. Campos also said the Legos website has cool implementation. If it's pagination by default, it is paginated by default and has a nice button to load more. If you click it, then it starts to auto load more things. That's pretty cool. But yeah, infinite scrolling. Can't say that I'm a fan, but as users of social media, we kind of expect infinite scrolling, and that's the only place in which I can't say that I'm mad at it because I expect it. But for anything else, and deceptive patterns aside, right? Obviously, deceptive patterns aside, you kind of expect infinite scrolling on a social media platform. But anywhere else, it just is like, why? It's just do the paginations. That's my 2 cents. But yeah. Kathy said, never thought of it as a deceptive pattern. I remember when one of the company's websites had infinite scrolling, but the client requested pagination because it was useful for them to share the URL as it changed. It's cool.
Well, imagine somebody with arthritis having
Yeah.
to scroll and scroll and scroll.
Awful.
Or somebody with a motor skill issue having to try and scroll and scroll and scroll.
I don't have motor issue, but using my phone, if I'm going through Facebook and flipping through the posts, or there's one site I've used where, to purchase things and flip through their catalog things. At some point, my thumb, like that action, it's tired, and I have to use that action to get everywhere on the screen. And so to have to, have that happen, or to have to use that so often for that auto scroll or the infinite loading is ridiculous. And then you can't actually get to like, what's it called, like a toolbar at the bottom either in a lot of these apps because of the infinite scroll. You have to literally go and hunt down for it, which you can do, but some screen reader users are much more comfortable flicking through everything. And if you try and get them to have to navigate by touch, it's not their preferred method, and they shouldn't have to. But
Right.
anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you.
My little mini rant.
Yeah, and that is pretty much spas in a nutshell. But while we're talking about spas, in our last about 15 minutes, we wanted to talk about a new topic that we have only mildly touched on as we've done our study group, which is deceptive patterns and anti-patterns. And I'm glad we're talking about it because we have Todd here today, and Todd is pretty much an expert on deceptive patterns. And I've learned a lot about deceptive patterns from you, Todd. One of my favorite things that I think about a lot now too is the fact that you all may know this as a dark pattern instead of a deceptive pattern. And I'll let Todd take over why we should start calling it deceptive patterns and not dark patterns, and what those things are. Like, what are we talking about even?
Okay. So dark pattern is and can be problematic. Now, when I had first approached this side of things, I get, tech bro, white dude. Oh, come on. What do you have to do? The whining tech bro moment. Which basically just goes right by me. I just don't listen to it. Dark, problematic connotation. I've given talks about this where, it goes back to old cowboy movies in the 60s. You had the bad guy in the black, and you had the good guy in the white, and he was the hero, and blah, 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 and the bad guy was evil, blah, blah, blah. So for me, I sat there and I thought about it and I said, well, there's more deception going on here than anything. Dark just makes it seem Halloweenish. And I said, deceptive is probably a better term because that's what the pattern is about. It's about deceiving the user. It's about taking the user down a road they don't want to go and having the user do something that they may not want to do, like having to search for an hour on how to unsubscribe from a newsletter or delete your account with somebody, for instance. So deceptive is more apropos, in my opinion. So that's when I introduced that to the W3C, and we're working on getting that into WCAG 3 when WCAG 3 comes out. Hopefully when I'm retired and not doing tech anymore. But it's basically, I don't like the term. I don't like the connotation or the, the history behind that. I mean, we did this with Master in Maine. We did this with, black hat, white hat, and all sorts of different terminology. And, the dudes that showed their whole selves, were in an uproar, and everybody who understood and said, you know what, that's a great idea. We saw who those people were as well. We saw who the helpers were. So, I'm more deceptive pattern because these are patterns. These are patterns that have deception in them, whether with or without intent. And without intent is just bad UX, bad design. We in the W3C we name those anti-patterns. So, you have your anti-pattern, you have your deceptive pattern. Deceptive pattern with intent. Anti-pattern without intent, it's just, anti-pattern, again, bad design, bad UX.
Right. I also like that when you see deceptive pattern, there's no ambiguity with what it is. You don't have to really like guess what you're talking about. Especially with you're like, dark, I guess is bad. But it's like deceptive. Oh, yeah, no, it's deceptive. It's something that's trying to trick me. Let's talk about some examples of these types of patterns. Anti-patterns kind of happen by accident. They just happen to be bad. And it's more about knowing what good user design is to avoid those things. But deceptive patterns are there to trick you in some way, to not have you exit out of something, or to not cancel something, or to get your money in some way, to keep you on a page, to keep you on a product, to get you where they want you to be, even though that's not where you want to be. And I have an example on the screen, and I'll kind of explain it in the best way I can. But there's a pop-up on here that says, are you sure you want to cancel your membership? You will no longer be able to use our services if you do. And there's 2 upside down cups with little balls in them. And no, 3 cups. The first 2 upside down cups have a ball that says no and no. And then the last one says yes. So here they're like giving you 2 options that are no, and then giving you one that's yes. The one that I have been seeing a lot lately, and it makes me so mad, is do you want to cancel? And it'll be like no and yes, and no will be in green and yes will be in red. So like your mind automatically goes to the green, even though it's the opposite of what you want to do. So things like that are exploding around the web. I believe that there is a bill in Congress or whatever. I don't know where the bill is, but the bill is pretty much to make it easier for people to cancel subscriptions so that you don't have to call a number or do something extra to stop paying for a service. And I've noticed now, I think people are trying to get ahead of it by making it really hard to tell how to cancel something, even though they're giving you the option. So yeah, Do you have any other good examples of something like that, Todd, or anyone in the chat as well? Have you come across that in the wild, or you, Dorlin? And I'm wondering how a deceptive pattern would look for a screen reader user, just out of curiosity.
Well, I have one that just occurred to me. So, Todd, help me with this if this is a deceptive pattern. One thing I've noticed on YouTube that is just driving me bonkers and is when the ad panel pops up, like depending on what you're watching, you're going to have to watch the ad for so many seconds or maybe the length of it. But a lot of times you'll get a skip ad button that'll appear or link that'll appear at some point, and it's in different places. Like, so it moves around on me. You think, oh, it's going to be right after the pause button. Oh, but on this ad, it's actually the link to go to their websites next. And then after that is some other link and then the skip link. And other times it's right after that pause. Sometimes it's further down. And I don't know if that's an anti-pattern, but it kind of feels like it might be a deceptive pattern because they're definitely trying to get me to click on their links and click on that ad, and all I want to do is skip the ad and go back to my video.
Mm-hmm. Now, you can have one or the other, obviously, but they can be both at the same time as well. So what you've described, Dorlin, is obstruction. And what that basically is you were faced with barriers or hurdles which made it hard for you to complete your task. So you wanted to get that skip link, engage with it, skip the ad, and get to what the content you wanted. That's obstruction. And that's also sneaky because, and sneaking is another form of deceptive pattern. They're moving it all around on you, and it's not, it's not in one place. It keeps changing on you. So a component can have multiple deceptive patterns as well. And more often than not, they do, or they have multiple deceptive aspects to them. So, yeah, what you were describing was obstruction, definitely.
And I end up listening to the ad longer too because I'm trying to find this button in a different place each time. They definitely get a few more seconds out of me on each ad because of it.
Yep, and that's what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One other one I came across recently, and I think this is probably some combination of the two. I was trying to sign up for, not sign up, I was trying to put in an Instacart order, and I couldn't get past a pop-up screen or a screen in the process that wanted me to sign up for the Instacart Plus, 14-day free trial or whatever, then pay whatever. As much flicking around as I could do, I could not access a close button. There wasn't one to me on there, and I ended up, because I needed that order, it was something I needed right then, and it was just like, I'll cancel this later. I clicked OK so I could get to the next screen, and we all know what happened. I didn't cancel it. I'm an Instacart Plus subscriber for the next year, so like, I feel duped, and I'm assuming that there was a tiny little X button somewhere in there as well that I might have been able to explore around for, because I did turn my screen reader off to try to find if there was a button that was inaccessible to me to close it. But I think it was probably trying to be deceptive to sighted users too. There was probably a very small close button somewhere, small X, who knows what, but that's my other example for this one.
Yeah, those little X. We have limited real estate on mobile as it stands already. Me with these big chunky fingers of mine, it is so hard for me to tap an area that's 16 by 16 pixels or 20 by 20 pixels, or even smaller than that, 10 by 10 pixels I've measured once. and your tap areas need to be at least 44 by 44. So, um, it very, very frustrating, and I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. The biggest one for me was probably, and we've probably seen it in many different areas, and I'm going to put a link in the chat here, is comparison prevention. So basically what T-Mobile did years ago, and they've since changed it, is they had the top 3 tiers to buy, monthly plans on phones. But to get to the lowest price plan, you had to find the button to click, and then you were presented with, excuse me, you were presented with a modal pop-up, which gave you the lowest priced plan, which was $45, I believe, at the time. So, oh, there it is on screen. So, you have the $85 plan, you have the $70 plan, you have the $60 plan. Now, users that are not computer savvy are just going to click one of those 3. It's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they're very careful and they read, oh, there's a square there that says lowest price plan. Let me
That's
see if I can
wild.
click it.
I didn't even notice that till you said that. They would have got me.
Yep.
I think
Yeah,
the main one that I've been coming across that really makes me mad is ads when I'm reading an article and they make the X to click it off, like you said, so small that I just end up clicking on the ad. And I'm like, give me a break, man. Like, I know you're measuring this for your output of saying, look, we have a through rate of whatever. Buy our ad space. And it's like, it's just people accidentally clicking on it and immediately going back to whatever page they're on, but whatever.
We saw that with Twitter on mobile when they changed, where they added an extra tap in. So you had to actually, in order to block somebody, this was before all the changes to the block function, you had an extra tap to block somebody. So you had to go into their account in order to block them. You could not block them from the ad or the tweet or the retweet. So you have an extra step in order to block somebody, which is moot now because of all the changes.
Yeah, you can't even block anyone anymore.
Yep.
Which is another just wild thing.
Yep.
All right, well, that's it. We did it. We talked about single page applications. I really did learn a lot. This is really interesting because we reiterated a lot of things that we've already learned through this whole process of learning about the web. And we kind of applied it in a way. So this was really fun. We're not, I like that we're learning things that we have already touched on, but they're making more sense because we're applying them to very specific examples. So this is really great. But deceptive patterns, just, spread it around. You ever hear someone say dark patterns? Just be like, why not say deceptive patterns? Mostly because it's descriptive and it's not ambiguous. Everyone will understand what it is. And also, man, darkness is great. Without darkness, we won't have any light, as they say. So I don't like negative connotations for darkness at all myself. Lastly, I want to close out with, I really hope that everyone is excited and comes to chill with us when we talk about some Braille stuff. We're going to make a flyer. It's going to be our last stream of the year. And next year, we're going to close out with a few more topics on the WAS. And we'll also have Todd on to talk about the W3C and WCAG a little bit. But we'll be keeping you posted on that. Also, we'll be talking about Discord when we get into the Slack. We're going to figure out how to migrate everyone over. It's going to be a process. But thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you have any questions, let us know. You can always hit us up on Slack or LinkedIn or wherever else we're always hanging out. Any last words, my friends?
Go make things accessible.
While you still can.
Exactly.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, and well, like I always used to tweet too, accessibility is a right, not a privilege.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And kind of a short story here. Lately, I've been having to tell developers, just because you may not have a disability that you know of doesn't mean you have one later on. We all get older.
Yikes. Absolutely true. Or even a temporary one that lasts quite some time, enough for to annoy the ish out of you.
Yep.
Yeah.
But thank you for having me today. I really had, I really had fun. Thank you, everybody in chat, and yeah, eat more lobster.
Indeed. Next time, Todd will be on here with a lobster suit, so we have that to look forward to.
I do have a lobster suit. I actually wore it while I gave while I gave a talk last year.
Oh, that's good.
Any last words,
Well,
Dorlin?
Tank's next Halloween costume will have to be a big pat of butter or something then, I suppose. But no, thanks for coming on, Todd. This was great. I learned a lot. I enjoyed our discussion too, and getting into deceptive patterns and just how it all kind of is interconnected. It's been good.
All right, friends, we'll see you next month. Be safe out there. Bye.
Bye, guys.